Thank you. And my talks are always extremely informal, so feel free to jump in, ask questions along the way if you want me to elaborate on anything. So I guess I should begin by maybe helping to describe a little bit about, I'm not going to go into all the history of the Lenape people. Unless you have questions, I can. But our people have been here for over 13,000 years. That's what archaeologists have found. You know, we call ourselves the original people. And so the Lenape people were known as the peacekeepers. And we were of the original people in this area. Other tribes would come to us to decide disputes and that sort of thing. I could talk a little bit more about our tribal structure, and maybe I'll get into that a little bit. But let me just talk a little bit about, I might start with the story of the 4 crows, which is sort of a prophecy of our people. Then I'll go through each of those crows. And so there was a story that was passed down by our elders that basically, I'm giving you the short version. My son will give you the long version. He's our story keeper. A fox will be loosed upon the land, and 4 crows will come. The first crow lived in harmony with Creator. The second crow got sick and died. He tried to clean the world. The third crow saw what happened to his brother, the second crow, and hid. And the fourth crow lived in harmony again with Creator. The caretakers will work together on the earth. So we feel now that our chiefs have, and clan mothers, my clan mothers before myself, we have 4 clan mothers now. I'm not the only one, and some have been with us a good long time. Sort of define this as the 4 times of the Lenape. So the first crow who lived in harmony, that would have been before European contact. The second crow would have been European contact, when we lost a lot of our culture and our land. And then third crow is when we had to go into hiding. In other words, we couldn't practice our beliefs and our culture and our language outwardly. And there are ways that we managed to pass as much of it down as we could. And I will talk more and specifically about that. And then the fourth crow is when our people come out again and work as caretakers with other neighbors in the area. And we feel that this actually happened with our first treaty signing in 2002. So I'll talk more about that. So those are the sort of 4 basic times of the Lenape people. I can talk a little bit more about the culture, but I'll talk a little bit right now just about the diaspora and the current, because it's confusing to people about the different Lenape tribes that exist. So once there was European contact, and I'll go to a little bit different of the history, but when it got to the point where we were taken out of our land, there were numbers of ways that happened. There were forced removals of the people there was sort of, it's not Trail of Tears for Lenape, but it was like that. That's Cherokee. So the government has these Dawes rolls that they had names of people on, and they forced them outward. They were in Kansas for a while. And finally they wound up in Oklahoma. So we have 2 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma. Some were forced, actually first to Massachusetts, and then on their way, they have their own trail. It took them about 100 years, but they wound up in Wisconsin. They are federally recognized. Many of our people went up to what is now Canada. At that point, it wasn't. And so we have 2 tribes that are recognized in Canada. Those are tribes that are recognized by the federal governments. And then we have the people who stayed behind. And the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania represents the people who stayed behind. There's a tribe in northern Jersey, the Ramapo Lenape, who represents people who have stayed behind. They are state recognized in New Jersey. There's the Nanticoke Lenape in southern New Jersey, who are also state recognized, who have always been here. And they are sort of a mixture of the people who intermarried with black slaves, and a wide variety of differents. Some even mixed with Cherokee, down it that way. And then we have the northern, the Lenape Delaware in northern Delaware. And they are state recognized. So I'll get back to this later, but Pennsylvania is the only place in our homeland who does not recognize its indigenous people. And so that's why we have an ongoing effort today to try to gain state recognition. And that's important because without state recognition, we're not permitted to sell our goods as Native American made. So for example, our elder, who's wonderful beater, good with all native craft, has to sit next to a sign that says that these goods are not Native American made. We can't own raptor feathers, which are important in our ceremonies. Now, we like to stress that there are very good reasons for restrictions on owning raptor feathers, because you had these hunters going out, there are very good reasons for those restrictions, but exceptions are made in the case of Native Americans, federally recognized, right, and Native Americans, because they know how we care for, our relations. So that's it in a nutshell of where we are. So now I can go back just a little bit. Let me just give you a little bit about the culture, the worldview of the Lenape people. And that is, as you might have reckoned from the prayer, that we don't view the world as geographical units of two-leggeds, of human beings. We see it as it was created by a great spirit with all of the nations of the earth. And so we have, in our view, the winged nation, the four-legged nation, the bug nation, the sea creature nation, the plant nation. The rocks are also very important to us. And so we have all those nations. And just as there is great diversity in all of those nations, there is great diversity in the two-legged nation. However, we don't consider ourselves any more important than any of those nations. And we treat them as family. So the birds, the plants, everything we treat with great respect. Just as we treated our elders with great respect here today, we would treat an elder tree. We would never chop down an elder tree. We would never shoot an elder deer. And I can talk to you about our relationship with the deer and how all that works. Because with small children, I always get, well, you kill animals. And so with vegetarians, I get that too. So I need to maybe explain the relationship with all of those. We consider them all our brother and sister. Yes, the deer provided us with pretty much everything, just like the buffalo did out west. And so, did any of you ever see Last of the Mohicans? It's a pretty old movie now. Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot of that movie was fairly well done. I read all of the Leatherstocking tales, and I really enjoyed them. The one issue I had with the movie was that if you've read the Leatherstocking tales, you know that Natty Bumppo was not the most attractive man in the world. And then they put Daniel Day-Lewis in the movie, which I have no problem looking at Daniel Day-Lewis. But other than that, and a few other little comments he made that were sort of sarcastic, that will not be personal of me, but they weren't in the book. In the very beginning of that movie, Chingachgook and he are running through the forest and they're chasing a deer. And they shoot the deer. And then they sit down, and Chingachgook is very solemn with the prayer of the deer, giving thanks for what the deer is providing, and thanking his brother and that sort of thing. And so there's a prayer that's given, and there's great thankfulness for what's being provided. And we would never shoot a deer that, first of all, not an elder deer. We would let him go out of respect. He's an elder. And we would only choose one that was adequate for our needs, and we would use every part of it. And I could spend this whole time just telling you all of the parts of the deer that we used. But the main thing to understand is that we believe that anything that we have harvested from that deer helps us to it carries on the spirit of that deer. And any kind of feather that we might wear, or it carries on the spirit of that animal out of respect. Lenape people, I can't get the site out of my mind because this happened maybe 7 or 8 years ago. In the field next door to my house, I saw a decapitated deer. And so this is what I'm talking about. You know, there are hunters out there. Obviously, this person just wanted the rack to hang on his wall. You know, everything else was wasted. You know, we would never do something like that. We have great respect for, in fact, on the way over here, I probably said prayers at least 5 times for the roadkill out there, for those poor animals. I always say a prayer when I pass the meat section in the grocery store, because who knows what kind of lives those animals had. So that's really important to understand that, yes, you know, we did eat certain animals, but that there was we would never take more than we need of anything. And that extends to plants. I'll talk about that in a little bit. In fact, we consider it a very disgraceful thing to have more than you need. I'm not talking about basic things that you want. If you like cars and you have a couple cars, that's fine. I'm a musician, I have 5 guitars, okay, that's fine. I'm talking about extreme excess would be very much looked down upon in Lenape culture, especially if someone else was in need in the tribe. So, in fact, have any of you ever heard of Indian giving? No? Well, we used to hear about that when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
An Indian giver is somebody who takes something back that he gave you. We do that. But let me explain what's been lost about that tradition. And that is that if you have more than something that you need and someone else in the tribe needs it, then you give it to them. But if you see that they're not using it, then you have the option to take it back and give it to someone who will use it. So that's where that whole concept came from. So yeah, we're Indian givers in a certain sense. The most important thing to know about Native Americans in general, and Lenape people certainly, is that view that we have toward all of our relations and the respect that they have. I recently, I was talking to, I'm sorry, what was your name? I was sitting next to
Joyce.
Joyce.
Yes.
We were talking about that I do ethnobotany. I do medicinal properties of plants. It's another one of my interests. And so, you know, in order to do that and study the medicinal properties of plants, a lot of respect goes to the plant. I sit, I contemplate, I listen, I smell. What does it taste like? What does it offer? What do you want to be called? Because we've lost names for our plants. Another thing I do is language. So in our revitalization process, I'm trying to come up with good names for these plants. But we would never take the first plant. We would offer a prayer. We would offer tobacco. And then we would let that plant go. Once we have permission, we would take only what we need. And then in letting that plant go, we would be sure that it was never wiped out. You know, that it always would. So that's a really important thing. When you're walking, if you really understand that there's energy, it's really easy to know that you get energy back from your pets or for animals, but a lot of people don't extend that to plants. You know, they don't realize there's great energy out there. I never feel alone in the woods. There's relations all around me, and they do give off energy, and they do respond to your energy. So, you know, when you're walking, it's a whole new world when you really look at the world that way. So there's you know, if you have more questions about our culture, I can certainly answer those. There's just so many aspects of the culture that I could talk about. Probably the next most important thing, that when I only have a little bit of time and I have to talk about, you know, maybe what's the most important thing to know about Lenape, and this is with some other tribes. The most important thing that the elders need to do, and as I said, there's great respect for elders in our tribe, and once you become a grandparent, your work is done. Your meals will be brought to you. We try to do that as much as we can in modern society. I'm talking about traditionally. And in fact, traditionally, you know, a tribe was mostly all extended family. You had your aunts and your uncles and you know, you had a huge amount of family in your tribe. And we didn't have last names. So, you know, there would be the Wolf clan, and they would all be related. You know, there would be maybe the Deer clan, they would all be related, and many, many clans. And so you would never intermarry into your clan, just like you don't intermarry into your family. You would, if a gentleman wanted to marry a lady, there were certain sweet little courtship things he would do. Playing flute was one. But then he would, when they married, go to live with the woman's family. And the women, the children would take on the clan of the woman. So it's sort of a matriarchal society. Also, in our society, it is the women elders who make the important decisions in the tribe if it comes to an issue. There's a circle of elders, men and women, who make all the decisions, you know, the important decisions. And then if it has to, it goes to the clan mothers. The clan mothers also appoint the chiefs, because it is their children who suffer the consequences or reap the benefits of what is done. And then it's up to the chief and the warriors to count out the wishes of the elders, you know. So everyone has their job, which brings me back to what I was saying before. So the most important job of the elders is to watch the children and help guide them on their path, because, you know, it is our belief that everyone has a gift that is sacred, and it's endowed by Creator. So the most important thing that our elders have to do is to watch the children and make sure that they're on their path, you know. So they're watching this one wandering off into the woods. There's a poet, okay. This one really knows his plant medicine, or hers. It was actually the women that were the plant doctors. This one is organizing everybody chief, you know. And because if you are on your path, that's how you're going to be happy. That's how you're going to contribute the best to the tribe, and you're going to be competent in your field. And no one job is more important than the others. There's certain respect that is given for clan mothers, for chiefs, for whatever, but my job isn't any more important than the chief's job, than the person who fixes his car, than the person who collects the garbage. Everybody is, you know, all those jobs are needed. Where would we be without the people who fix our cars? Where would we be if nobody ever collected the garbage? Hopefully we're recycling it. But, those are probably the two most important aspects of trying to understand how natives walk. And this is what we call the red path, or the red road. When you hear natives talk about the red road, that's what it means. It basically means respect for all our relations and the way that we treat them. So, getting a little bit back to the history, which will kind of bring us down to what we want to talk about with what we've been doing these days. How long do you want me to talk? Am I?
Keep going. Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can keep going, trust me. So, obviously, we lived here for many years in that way I just described. And then when it came to Second Crow, which is when Europeans first arrived, at first, some of the early colonials were friendly with the Lenape people. Actually, the most friendly was William Penn. And although he was not a perfect individual, he really did a lot to respect. We have letters from him expressing his love. He was a Quaker. And if you know anything about the Quaker religion, they are very loving people. We still, to this day, have great ties with Quaker communities. So he did a lot to provide places for us, and we, in turn, gave him places for his family because there was a good friendship. He also went so far as to realize that these land deals were beginning to happen, and he made sure that there were interpreters in our language. He actually learned sort of like a trade jargon version of the language so that there could be interpreters to explain to us what marks we were making on papers. Because before that, we were just making marks on papers, and we didn't know about paper. Everything was oral. So William Penn was very helpful to us in many ways, the short story. It was his sons and grandsons that renounced the Quaker religion. Penn was only here for about 1.5 years, and then he went back to England. And his sons were here in the times of the land grab, and his grandsons. So they were the ones that completely relinquished the Quaker religion and just became basically not just land grabbers, but then they wanted us out of it. So they went to extreme measures to take us out of it. You might have heard of the walking purchase. That's probably the most famous, where they cheated us out of land. We thought we'd have a nice walk with them and talk and give them some acres to live in and, get to know each other. And the day of that came, they just took off running. They previously cleared paths, and they wound up occupying, and then they tilted the map somehow so that so they wound up with an area about the size of Rhode Island in Pennsylvania in the walking purchase. And then after they did acquire the land, they wanted us out of it. And so that's when, after the walking purchase, up until then, because Lenape are very friendly people, and hospitality is extremely sacred in our community. So we offered homes and land and all sorts of hospitable things until it got to the point where we realized we couldn't trust these people. And at that point, there were some nasty conflicts on both sides. We were fighting for our land. Atrocities were committed on both sides at that point. And we actually, in our cultural center in Easton, have a facsimile of the Pennsylvania Gazette back in the 1700s, where William Penn's grandson, John Penn, published how much he would pay for Lenape scalps, and he had specific prices for if they were men or women or children, or live Lenape people that could be sent into indentured servitude, either here or they would ship them to the Indies where they were colonizing back then. England was colonizing. So it got to be a pretty nasty thing. So needless to say, that is when I talk about the diaspora before, that is when people split. The people who wound up in Oklahoma, they were moved there to reservations by the federal government and remain federally recognized today. Others, as I said, went to Massachusetts, and they're known as the Mohican Munsee. Then we had people that went up to Canada. So let me talk a little bit about the Lenape who remained, which is the people in my tribe. And so I'll back up a little. So back as early as the 1600s, we had people coming over from Germany, from England, from Scotland, from Ireland. In this area, it was largely German. We have I've studied the genealogy. I know the families in this area. For years and years, I've studied them. And that's where my family comes from. So I'll talk about that particular history that I know of well, but I'm talking about the German connection, but that happened with other colonial races as well. The Irish, up in Mount Bethel, it was Scots Irish up there. where it is. I know it's around here. So there was a community actually of Scots Irish up there that intermarried with Lenape, if any of you know the history of this area. But anyway, so when these Germans or settlers first came in, Germans in particular were interested in farming, mainly. Some of them were fleeing religious persecution on their own. And so I actually have the ship's list of some of the families that came here, the Kunkles, the daughters, the Surfaces, a whole bunch. And they came in through Philadelphia, and they came straight up to what was the frontier, and that was this. Because they wanted to farm, and they didn't want to be around anybody else. They wanted to just start their own communities. And so we let our kids do that. They're fine. They know to be respectful. I mean, he ducked under the camera, so we're good. So these early families were established where when these men came in, they actually got along very well with Lenape women because the Lenape women, and they were farmers, so the Lenape women were the tillers of the soil. They knew the medicinal plants, they knew the soil, they knew how to farm. So they were very helpful. They weren't afraid of hard work. They were used to that. And so a lot of marriages happened between the very early settlers and Lenape women. And other reasons were that even the ones that did come over with some wives or families, it wasn't, not that the German women or the colonial women didn't get out in the fields. They worked hard too, some of them. But some of them maybe not so much. And then this I only share with adults. My grandmothers shared to me, who know of the German connection, that Lenape women expect certain relations, every night. It's just a natural thing, whereas a lot of German women would only participate in that for childbirth or procreation. So that's just a little tidbit that one of my grandmothers shared. But that's a motivator in some respects. So anyway, so these marriages did take place, and once they did take place, you have to realize how connected. After everything I've told you, I think maybe you can understand how connected we are to the land, and not just because of all our relations here, but also because of our ancestors. Thousands and thousands of years, we are extremely respectful and thoughtful of our ancestors, and this is one of the most sacred spots on the Delaware River. Historically, no one went through that river, through the Delaware Water Gap on pain of death without a Lenape escort. So even now, when we go down the river, we stop and let the Lenape lead through there, and we do honor songs and all that kind of thing, even until today. So it was important for them to keep their culture alive. And the early families were not shameful of Lenape ways. They embraced them, and you'll see lots of cases of colonial people going over to Lenape people once they get used to their ways, because they were kind, gentle people. And once you were in the tribe, you were considered Lenape. You were not considered different from anyone else in the tribe if you were accepted in the tribe. So these families of staying together. In fact, and again, I'm going to the German because I researched that and I know that area. But I was invited to the University of Pennsylvania to do a talk on, the history of our people here and the genealogies and that kind of thing. So I was doing some research and I found this really interesting, funny diary in the University of Pennsylvania archives. It was from a family named the Bropst, could be a P or B, family diaries. And I couldn't believe what I saw. There's this little story where a Lenape is looking into the field, and there's a farmer out there tilling the field and comes closer and closer to the woods every day. And when he gets really close, the Lenape jumps on top of him and draws back. And the farmer says, "Schuss nicht, schuss nicht." And the Lenape says, "Das thou Deutsch sprechen?" And so they were friends. But that was a gem, because we have naysayers. That was a gem, to help show that these early Lenape families were bilingual, German Lenape, Irish Lenape, whatever, and that they got along very well with each other. So some of the ways, as time went on, though, it became there was more and more pressure for us to outwardly look as people did in the 1700s. Now, these marriages took place in the mid to late 1600s. The removals did not take place till the late 17 and early 1800s. So these Lenape families were established well before the removals, very well established. And you'll notice if you go to the graveyards that the Lenape families stuck together. And even until my grandmother told me that when I was younger, that her mother would, even to this day, tell her, you hang out with these kids, you don't hang out with those kids. She didn't say because they're Lenape or whatever, but she would veer them towards certain families, And so back then, if you go to some of the old cemeteries, you can see, if you know the families, who the Lenape, are here, and then you're, like plain white people are here, and sometimes the Lenape are in the woods. So there are certain ways that once that started to happen, our language died out. We couldn't speak that at all. There were other things that we couldn't do, obviously, practice our ceremonies, anything like that, really. You'll see, if you look at the church records, many of us you'll see some would not baptize, but their children were. It's all fascinating and too much to go into right now, but outwardly we just had to. And I should have brought my pictures to show you, but they're online, so. There were certain ways we were able to pass our culture along. There are, on the German side, there was actually a stencil, and I wish I would have brought those photos. Sure.
Is there a website that we can go on to search?
Yeah, I'll leave you a card, and it's lenape-nation.org. Or Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. You'll find both. And if you go there, you go to our exhibit or the pen exhibit. We actually had an exhibit at the University of Pennsylvania on what I'm about to tell you, so I'll talk about that in a minute. To make a long story short, because I'm talking too long.
No.
Some examples of how they managed to pass their culture down. There was a stencil, and I wish I brought it. Lenape colors are red and black, having to do with our macing. I think I was talking that we're having our macing ceremony next week, which is where we celebrate the deer, give thanks for the deer. And there's a macing story about the person or personage, Bigfoot, who looked over the deer. And so he is represented by a red and black mask, and that goes back so far nobody remembers. That is why Lenape colors are red and black. Mm-hmm. So there was a stencil, and it's like a dark red. As you were sitting, it had to be eye level in your kitchen, and it looked like a little print of the four directions, but it was structured in such a way that it looked like a German sort of stencil. Mm-hmm. And then right next to it was like a little arrow sort of thing. And they both had dots, so the dot represents the soul in Lenape art. So you had actually the four directions with the dot of creator in the middle and like a sort of dancer. If I showed you the stencil, you wouldn't see that. But a Lenape person would see that. And that was just one way that they could keep, creator in their thoughts. And that would be in their kitchen. The kitchen would always, the kitchen, that's where everything happens. In Lenape culture, but it would be, the walls were always green, the ceiling was blue, and the floor was brown. There would be a cedar tree. Cedar is an extremely sacred herb to us, and I could spend the whole hour talking on that, but probably one of the dearest artifacts we have left that a clan mother passed down to us was that her grandmother, her grandmother's doll. And what they would do is the women, and I know more about the women because that's what has passed down to me, but the grandmothers would give, when they were talking to the granddaughters, remember I told you that it was up to the elders to pass the culture down because mom and dad were real busy. And so when they were giving these talks to the children, they had this doll that looked kind of just like a regular Victorian doll, a Raggedy Andy, and but if you with the like, what do you call that? That ginger, not ginger,
Oh, like
gingham, like little shirts and stuff and apron or whatever. But if you lifted the hair up on the back, you would see a face stitched the same color as the skin. To show you show one face to the world and you keep these things in secret. And this was her grandmother's doll, and she's in her 70s. So that was just one way. Another thing they would do is they would smush arborvitae, which is white cedar, which there's a lot of that around. And that is because, you know, when you think of your childhood, when you smell something, that's one of the main things that takes you back there. So they would make sure they were smushing the cedar as they were giving them the teachings, so it would help them remember. They would also put rocks around their flower gardens, and then that would be their prayer circle, because we do everything in a circle. And so we also believe, as other cultures do, that once you put a prayer on the rock becomes sacred. It remembers that prayer. It's very important. And so the same clan mother still had her grandmother's rocks. So those rocks would be passed down. Those same rocks would be passed down. Medicine pouches. You may notice that most Native Americans wear something like this. Mine is extremely ragged. That's because I'm old. And they have them all their lives, and they'll just put little things in there, like maybe a child's tooth, maybe a piece of cedar from a grave. Oh, who knows? I don't even remember all the stuff that I've put in here all my life. And then that gets buried with you, so it's a very sacred thing. And you'll see most Native Americans have one. Some people, I guess, refurbish theirs with a new one so it'll look nice on the regalia. I've never, from the moment I've had this, changed it. So that's why it looks the way it does. However, they weren't allowed to do that, obviously. So what my great-grandmother did was, our women became very good at tatting and sewing and picking up on a lot of the things that the women did. And so it was the fashion then to crochet edges around a handkerchief. And so what she did was she took a handkerchief and crocheted green around that and tied it with a ribbon. And she kept her things in there so that she could keep it in her drawer and it would look like a sachet. And I'm sure she put a lot of cedar and good smelling stuff, lavender and stuff in there too. So those are just a few ways. So just to wrap up, it's important to know that there were ways that we passed the culture down. And that is the story of the Lenape who remained here. This is a history that is not being told. It's a history that, fortunately, I mean, my son works really hard. He's our director of education, and he goes to a number of university schools, working on curriculum revision, as well as, you know, doing what I'm doing right now. And so we're working on trying to get that. The first academic institution that embraced it was the University of Pennsylvania. And you can go to their website now, and you can, they still have the exhibit up. But they had come up, actually we've dealt with them in a number of wonderful ways, and I will be there tomorrow at their arboretum, taking people through their beautiful arboretum of plants. But they had come up, we had relations with them, especially one of our clan mothers who was part of the Native American Association there, to repatriate a paddle to us that they thought, from the museum, that they thought that we might like to have. And then when they came, of course, hospitality. There's feasts, there's talking, there's food. And so they heard us talking, and this is Robert Purcell, who was at that time curator at the Penn Museum, heard us talking about these artifacts and this history, and he said, this should be told. And so he actually invited us to do an exhibit. That was in 2008 at the University of Pennsylvania. And these artifacts, all of these ones that I've told you about, except the rocks, were on exhibit there. The doll, the stencil, the medicine pouch, and a full facsimile of the pen. Because they modeled it on the 4 crows, as I just told you. So they had first, second, third, fourth crow. So they were the first ones to really give it academic credibility. And I'm only going to say this briefly, but these days there's just political issues, and we will always, and this is the most important thing to say first, welcome our diaspora back home, always. Unfortunately, the federally recognized tribes will not recognize us. And in fact, they follow me everywhere I go. You might get an email. Anywhere that's publicized that I go, they get an email from the federally recognized tribes saying, these people are not federally recognized, they have no right to speak about Lenape culture, they have no right to do this or that or whatever. So, although we do welcome them here, you'll find that happens, and so that's probably one of the main obstacles that we have to trying to get our history out there, because a lot of institutions, they've just recently, since Pennsylvania approved gambling mainly, have come back to claim land here and there. In fact, there's a big thing you should know about going on, if maybe you do know about, trying to get this whole area designated a national park, which we are very much against.
Yeah.
I specifically, in my tribe, I'm very much against and very active against that. And there are many reasons for that. Just the wear on our infrastructure, and I will tell you in a minute, partner with a number of environmental organizations who have said that it's just really going to be a strain environmentally in a lot of ways. But specifically for Lenape people, there's a federal tribe behind this with the few people that are fighting for it. And they want to have a Lenape preserve and a cultural center to which no local Lenape will be allowed to come or offer programs or anything like that. So, that's another issue with the park. But mainly the environmental issue. People will not be allowed to hunt here anymore. Families who have been hunting here for generations and generations. All that sort of thing. So, anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I only bring it up because you might get a call. And to let you know that, they totally disregard the history of the people here. I mean, I'm working right now with the National Historical Museum Commission on, because they have kind of edged their way into a point where they've gotten us kicked out of sites under the purview of the the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission last May. We used to do programs at Bushy Run, have reenactments. We used to do educational programs there. And now the Pennsylvania Museum Commission has come up with this: only federally recognized tribes can, do stuff here. So that's kind of going on. However, let me get to the good thing. Just wanted to let you know about that. So bringing us down to the fourth crow. In 2002, we actually have been, sort of the difference between the goals of the tribes is that we are, first of all, non-casino. Money is not the deal. It's caretakers. We are caretakers of the environment. We are caretakers of the river. And we always have been. And so we had actually been working with a number of environmental organizations, originally mainly environmental organizations like Northeastern Audubon, Delaware River Keepers, Delaware Wild and Scenic, Delaware Highlands Conservancy. These were partners of ours that we worked with on the Delaware as caretakers. And so in 2002, one of our members, who was spokesperson at the time, Jim Beer, got the idea, why not start a treaty with these people? so that we can sort of have a new treaty of friendship, bring about a renewal according to our own feeling that it's time to come together, heal the wounds of the past, and be with those people who are like-minded and want to caretake for all our relations in the river. So we started that in 2002, and we had 17 treaty signers going on down. We had Tinicum. I remember them because I'm the treaty signer liaison, and I've been dealing with these people for over the years, and it's just an amazing, wonderful community of people. But anyway, we decided we'd redo that, and then at the same time, we paddled the Delaware all the way from Hancock down to Cape May, although we have to take out, from Philly on down for a ways when the tidewaters come in. Took almost 4 weeks the first time to do the whole river. So we redo that every 4 years because the old treaty said, oh yeah, as long as the grass grows and the sun shines, then you know what happened with those treaties. So, and again, this is not a legally binding treaty, it's more just a friendship agreement. It's nothing legally binding, it's not, because you'll hear them say, oh, they can't sign treaties, and we're like, it's just a friendly, wonderful agreement, and that's all it is. So it's called the Treaty of Renewed Friendship. We renew it every 4 years. We go down the river again. And so this was our 20th anniversary in 2022. And now we have over 140 organizations and over 300 individuals that have signed the treaty. So we have a huge network of people, environmental organizations, a variety of churches, organizations, in nature societies, Churchville Nature Center, such as yourselves, academic institutions, even a number of governmental officials. I don't know what I might be forgetting. Some people who just offer, they might have a printing company, where they would do some printing. Anyway, that we can help the community. Elder societies, remember, to me, they're important. And so, we act as caretakers of the land, the river, and each other in that aspect. And so, for me, I've never been big on the recognition thing. I just know that our path has just blossomed since we have been on what I feel is the red road and not deterred, because the minute you start dealing with the government, and they've already got issues that I won't even talk about. The Poor Recognition Committee, with what they have to deal with, begging for, recognition in their own land. But, look at this community, and I deal with them all the time on different issues. We got fracking out of the northern Delaware. We stopped the Penny's pipeline, and we're working on the park, the No National Park, and many other little things. So, we have experts we can go to for questions, which we did about the park. Okay, let us know, how is this going to affect the environment? How is it, and downriver and upriver, it will affect. So we have a wonderful variety of people. And so I have watched this thing grow all these 20 years. And it amazes me. And to me, this is our recognition. We have the recognition of the people. And Oklahoma keeps trying to dig away at them, and they do get to some. But to me, that's the most important thing, and that's the thing that I would never want to lose. If we get state recognition, the government always puts exceptions on things, and rules, and our stance is that no, we are self-determining. We will decide who's. Because they've had a few other things going where they would have a group of federally recognized people who would decide who would be recognized in Pennsylvania. So I don't even want to go there. I pity the poor people on the recognition committee, but God bless them, something that some of our chiefs have wanted for a long time because they feel it's important for our children to be recognized, in the state. It would give them a sense of pride. Not that we don't instill that in them, but it would help, yes.
So I live on Scottsdale land, and it's similar in that they're not recognized. I'm just wondering if some of the unrecognized nations are working together across territories. So for instance, do Lenape here work with Piscataway and Maryland on these similar issues?
Good question. I'm actually working with the wife of Chief Mann, who is one of the chiefs of the Lenape Nation that I told you about in northern Jersey. The two of us work really together on the no national park thing. Yeah, as far as recognition goes, Oklahoma has been far crueler even to the Ramapo in New Jersey because they have land. And then they went after the Ramapo, the Nanticokes in southern Jersey, also having to do with land. I don't know the details, but that's what gets them. You know, it's money and land, and nobody else should be here. Again, all they've had all these years is that federal recognition to hang on to. They don't belong in Oklahoma. Our relations are here. Our ancestors are here. And so I wish I could get them out on the river, going through the gap, because I feel like the ancestors would speak. You know, they don't know these sacred places. I don't know if you guys know where Cold Air Cave is. That's extremely sacred. It's in the midst of the Delaware Water Gap, and there's like a turtle rock on top. That's my sacred spot where I sit and look down at the river and do my prayer. And I've been doing that since I was very young. And the ancestors can just be felt so strongly there. And there are other places too, probably anywhere, but for me, you know, that's where I feel them most strongly. And, you know, so for them to make land deals and this park deal about places that they call their home that they know nothing of, you know, I don't think they've ever felt the sacredness of the river. You know, in going through the Delaware recreation area, you know, all the way from whatever, Bushkill down to Martins Creek or whatever. So that is what the treaty's about, and that's how wonderful it's been. That's sort of our attitude toward our neighbors in this time of the Fourth Crow. We're very fortunate to have a number of treaty signers. And then we continue, and this is my job, because I'm treaty signer liaison. It's my job to coordinate the programs. I mean, you don't just sign a treaty and that's it. We don't hear from you for 4 years. We continue to work together on issues, but provide educational programs, you know, so we might be able to come here and do, who knows, something for the children, which is, to us, the important thing is the children, of course, and you don't make a step, and you'll hear this from other nations, the Lenape. Every action you don't take until you consider how it will affect the next 7 generations. So children's programs are really important, and I do a killer children's program with different kinds of games that they can make on their own and play and that kind of thing, or just educational programs that we do. And like, as I said, you know, I've been to a number of churches and offered a prayer. I was just at Moravian Academy, where we got to do some healing there because of the past with the Moravians, but also accentuate the fact that they helped to save our language. You know, this is what the Fourth Crow is all about. And the fact that their families did take some of our people in. And, you know, that it was crazy at that time. So, so basically that's what the treaty's about. I'm going to stop now and see if anybody has any questions specifically about anything, really. Yeah.
One of the first things you mentioned was the peacemaking vocation of the Lenape, and I'm a little familiar with that, but I'm wondering if you would say something about how that works and plays out.
Yeah, well, they were known as the grandfather tribe way back then, and so other tribes in the area, when they would have disputes, would bring them to the Lenape, and the Lenape would help to solve the disputes. A lot of that took place in Easton because that's where the forks of the Delaware and the Lehigh come together. So that was a huge treaty area where a lot of our tribes would meet. And the Lehigh is just as important, you know, as the Delaware. It's just, I know every inch of that Delaware, and it's to me. So I'll talk more about the Delaware, but the Lehigh is also extremely important. I never really told you the original Lenape homeland is southern New York, eastern Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, and northern Delaware. So that is what we call Lenape Hoking, Hoking meaning land, land of the Lenape. So there are probably historical documents that could give you more detail, but you'll find a lot of this also recounted in the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois. That's the name for Iroquois people, because they were some of the tribes that were involved in some of these early councils. As far as other specific tribes, I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure. Any other?
I know that we're not terribly far from Carlisle, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, was the first Indian boarding school, and I just wondered whether that trauma and horror is part of the Lenape history as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, the children were taken from their homes, you know, and also from tribes out in Oklahoma and brought here. And other tribes too. It wasn't just Lenape people. And I'm sure you know the history of that. I mean, we have people that descend from those people. And when I say we're in the time of the fourth crow, I can tell you that that's a lot easier for the newer generation, even my generation, than it is for our some of our elders, who, you know, there's still bitterness in some families and with some people. They don't want anything they don't even want to be a part of the tribe. They don't want a card, because we give cards out for people, and you have to be of Lenape descent. I explained to you a little bit how, you know, we study the genealogies. I know the families in this area. Chief Bob knows the families in Philly. Chief Carol knows the families in the Easton area. So we've done extensive genealogical research, and no one can be a member of the Lenape Nation without our being able to prove their Lenape descendancy. So I need to say that, because again, naysayers will say otherwise. What was the question? Carlisle. So I just, yeah, we do have people that have descended from there, and so there are people who are, you know, they just want to live their lives. You know, they're not interested in politics or even having somebody say they're Lenape, or they don't care if anybody knows they're Lenape or not. You know, you're going to have those people, and bless them. Sometimes I wish that's where I was. Not really, because I've made so many wonderful friendships, and have been able to do so much as a caretaker and encouraging other caretakers. But yeah, that's a hideous part of our history that I try not to concentrate too much on, that I sort of assume people know about, but a lot of people may not. Has everyone heard of Carlisle? Is there anyone who's not heard of Carlisle? And that was not the only one. There were a number of schools like that. Yes?
I already went, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
How can we help?
Yeah.
Well, I think speaking out for us, especially when confronted by naysayers, and I won't name any specific ones because there are a number of people who will do that. So signing the treaty, you know, it's going to be more of a challenge, I think, this next year than previously, because certain federally recognized tribes have really just recently, you know, dug in. So as soon as they hear about a treaty signing, you know, they'll probably get in touch. But I don't like to dwell on that. Mm-hmm. Signing the treaty, working with us, you know, letting the community know more about us. If you have ways of just putting out our history, you know, land acknowledgements are a big thing. That's what a lot of people are doing now. They have plaques on their property somewhere or on their website, you know, saying that we recognize that this is the land of the Lenape people. And so that's a big start. Signing the treaty, it would not hurt to sign the petition. And we also have a letter writing campaign go. So if you ever, we have suggested representatives on there that you can send these letters to. And if you don't have time to write your own, we have a sample letter you can cut, paste, send. Or you may have your own representative. I have to say, I was really happy to talk to Matt Cartwright. We just had a treaty signing at Dingman's Ferry Museum, and he came. And we sat down, we had a nice talk, and he bought about one of our caps, and he said that absolutely he supports us for state recognition. And I said, can I tell you people that you are publicly stating that I asked very specifically, and he said absolutely. So, and I have a picture. So it was nice talking to him. I had other questions for him regarding the constitutionality of federal agencies interfering in state law. I'm sort of pursuing that little avenue. But, so he had some interesting answers to that too. But, yeah, so it really is important to a lot of our people, the state recognition thing. And if we could get that, it would help us, in our struggles. But mainly for our own children's identity. So, there's lots of ways. Spreading the word, helping to get, combat the erasure of our identity here is the big thing. Yes.
So, my sons went on indigenous sort of inspired coming of age rites of passage to the West Coast. None of our traditions from my family meant much to us.
Yeah, we have that thing too at puberty, but I didn't really get into that.
Yeah, but I think there is a lot of interest in understanding and getting a bit more exposed to indigenous practices, and then you always bump into that, like, well, we don't want to culturally appropriate, but we do want to understand and know and get exposed and lift up these practices. And given that Kirkridge does a lot of different kinds of programming, is that something that would be of interest to the Lenape here, to help expose people more in terms of what some of these practices are, and even if it's native spirituality, or just
as long as it's conducted by a Native American person. Our ceremonial chief is Chuck Gentleman, and he could always offer a blessing. He could offer a discussion. As far as conducting, one way you might be able to help is that this is just in the heart of our sacred territory. We may even be able to have a gathering here, maybe a midwinter ceremony here. Maybe we could offer our ceremonies here. We do not publicize our ceremonies, but we have often invited friends, so you would be more than happy to, and you can now if you want to come to our Meeting ceremony. That's taking place up at his house this year, I think, in Stroudsburg, off the beaten path. But yes, offering the property, it's gorgeous. I, on my way in here, Fred was in front of me. I'm like, oh, the asters are still in bloom. And I do a lot of plant walks, so I could do programs here on indigenous plants, medicinal plants, maybe even have a nice little Lenape dinner. So there's many ways we could partner, but as far as the spiritual beliefs or anything like that goes, as long as that would be conducted by, a member of the tribe. I don't really foresee us having the type of ceremony that would go along with our elders speaking to our youth about vision quest or something like that. That's a little too personal. But there might, in fact, I shouldn't even be speaking on this. That would really be for Chuck to talk to you about. And I'm sure he'd be glad to do that.
I have kind of a related question. How about in the classroom? We have hundreds of thousands of classrooms around this country. What's a respectful way of making children aware and appreciative of this history without putting the strain on you and people in your family to offer this information? What's the balance?
Well, we do work on that. In fact, I used to be director of education, and when they made me clan mother, I retired that, and now my son does it. And he's just done an amazing job. But we are working on curriculum development in schools. To tell this story that I've told you, it's not told. In fact, it's only recently, I mean, forever, and in fact, it may still be that way if you go on the internet or anywhere else, they'll say the Lenape were, the Lenape don't exist anymore, they were all removed, and that's what Oklahoma will tell you. Although now they know better, because there's just too much proof out there. Now they don't say that anymore. They just say they don't count because they stayed here. And we could just as easily say, well, they don't count because they left, but we don't. You know, but yes, updated curriculum in schools is one of, it's actually on the treaty. You know, how can I help with updated curriculum in school districts? And we're working with Waldorf School. My son is actually teaching at Arcadia now. We've got Northampton County Community College would like to offer Lenape history classes and possibly a language class. So schools need to be open to that.
To be delivered by the teachers or guest speakers?
No, to be delivered by the teachers.
By the teachers, okay.
Yeah, we don't have enough.
Yeah.
You know, and first of all, it's best if you could just get into the curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I taught school, I'm certified in English, and then my master's is in history, and I used to teach English and history. I remember that was at that point back in '79 when I started up to the '80s. That's when they took Pennsylvania history out of the curriculum altogether. Now I get called in fourth grade a lot, so I'm assuming there's some semblance of, you know, Native American history or Lenape history in fourth grades now. But it's not gonna, none of it is going to cover